Welcome back to the Veteran Teacher Files. I'm your host, the Dragon Lady. Today's story was inspired by something that happened recently at my son's daycare. One morning at drop-off, I was asked to sign a parent notification letter. Now, I'm pretty close with the preschool daycare manager, so I asked her what happened. And apparently, the school had been written up because a child had been left outside during recess. The teacher had done a head count, everything checked out, and as the teacher turned around to let the class in, a student decided to run back towards the playground and hide under a slide. So when the teacher realized the child was gone, panic set in, and yada, yada, yada. And when I heard the story, I laughed and said, "Oh yeah, I've had something like that happen to me before." And immediately I remembered April of 2014. Now, before anyone panics, this story is from 2014, not recently. I've had time to recover, mostly. But hearing that daycare story unlocked a memory I hadn't thought about in years. A field trip, a bus, and one missing third grader. Now, if you've ever taken students off campus, you already know it is stressful as heck. Field trips are fun for students. They are exhausting for teachers. You've got permission slips, lunches, chaperones, emergency contacts, bathroom breaks, and at least one child who will suddenly forget how time and space work the second you leave school grounds. And the entire day becomes one long counting exercise. Count before you leave. Count getting on the bus. Count getting off the bus. Count again because someone sneezed and the line shifted. By the end of it, you're not even teaching anymore. You're just auditing humans. Now, this particular field trip involved 3 third grade classes and 2 buses. And we counted before we boarded. Everyone was accounted for. So we headed back to school. It was almost towards the end of the school day. It was April. The weather was warm. It was bright and sunny. We're relaxed and smiling. Everything was good. So when we got to school, the buses unloaded and each class gathered around their teachers. Now, I've been teaching for a few years by this point, and these are third graders. I've done my head count getting onto the bus. I didn't really think I had to count again. Plus, it was almost the end of the school day. Everything looked normal. Everything looked fine. And that's a dangerous moment because when everything looks fine is usually the prequel to chaos. So we started walking back towards the classrooms. And at this point, I'm kind of starting to run on teacher autopilot. Again, like I said, it's towards the end of the school day. So I'm kind of walking quickly because I want to get everything packed up and the kids out of here. It's Friday. I want to go home too. Now, my students are not allowed to just walk into the classroom. No. I am the Dragon Lady, and they are trained. Very trained. They line up, they tuck in their shirts, and they stand quietly. And they wait for me and my signal before entering. So as they're walking down the hallway, some kids are trying to get in their line, they're tucking in their shirts, and I hear one student ask, "Where's Eric?" And I heard the question, but I didn't fully process it. And by that point, I'm already at the door, so I do what I always do. I put my key in the lock, and the class is by this point lined up. So I scan the line, and it hits me. Eric isn't there. Now I give a signal so the students are entering, and I ask another student, Mike, to go check the bathroom, because I'm thinking, maybe he went to the bathroom. And on the outside, I'm trying to stay calm, but on the inside, my brain is automatically opening up about 47 tabs that all in some way are a version of, "Oh, beep." So Mike runs off. And the class continues filing in. And I stand there doing that very teacher thing that when you're actively managing children while internally panicking and possibly, the possibilities, I've probably lost a kid, I'm probably going to jail, I'm losing my job. Even right now, telling you the story, I'm starting to feel that panic all over again in my stomach. So it feels like a half an hour has passed, but it's probably only been 30 seconds, and Mike comes around the corner, practically stumbling into the classroom. I ask, "And?" He looks at me completely serious and says, "He's not in there. I crawled on the ground. I checked." Apparently, this was a full tactical bathroom inspection. Very thorough. No detail overlooked. But still, no Eric. Okay, now it's dismissal time. And every teacher knows that is the absolute worst time to have anything go wrong. I'm standing there trying to decide my next move. Do I call the other third grade teachers? I mean, maybe he's over there. Do I call the office? Do I call the principal? I have a number. Do I call his parents? Like, oh my gosh. Or do I just start running in random directions and hope for the best? And then one of my students looks up and asks, "Are we going to pack up?" And I say, "Yeah, of course." Because apparently my brain has decided that routine is the only thing holding reality together. So we pack up. Table by table, chairs go up, backpacks go on, and the line starts to form once again. And now the kids are whispering. I wish they were quiet like the little girl lines in Miss Madeline, or, the ones Miss Mademoiselle teaches in Madeline, but nope, not my class. They're trying to whisper and they're kind of talking. Some of them are not whispering, and they're starting to ask, "Where's Eric? Is he in another class? Did he go home?" And every time I hear it, my panic is increasing. I mean, guys, right now I'm telling you this story and I'm starting to get some sweats and I'm getting goosebumps in my arms. So yeah, I'm standing at the doorway waiting for the other third grade teacher to open up her door because I know my partner and it just takes her a little bit longer. So when she finally opens her door, I burst over to her and I tell her, "Eric's missing. I need to talk to the principal. Can you walk my class to car line?" She looks at me. "Eric's missing. I need to talk to the principal. Can you walk my class to car line?" Eyes wide, jaw dropped, immediate silent nod, no questions, because every teacher knows those words are not casual. I turn back to my class. "Okay, everybody, have a great weekend, and tell Miss So-and-so when you see your parent, okay?" And I run. Now, if you've heard my other episodes, you know that I used to be not a professional runner, but I used to be a runner. So I go full sprint down the hallway, and I nearly take out a group of first graders starting to come out of their classrooms with their backpacks that are bigger than they are. But I don't care. I don't slow down until I reach the office, and I burst through the doors. When I do, I walk in, I look in the secretary's direction, I ask, "Is she in there?" While already moving towards the principal's door. I'm not stopping. I don't even remember what the secretary said because I was already inside her office, and fortunately, she was in there and she was alone. So I get to her desk and say, "One of my students is missing." And I start to explain everything. The trip, the buses, the count, the bathroom check, the growing certainty that something is very wrong. Now, I wasn't the biggest fan of this principal. That's a completely different episode. But in this moment, that woman was my hero. She didn't hesitate. She stood straight up and said, "It's all good. Go get the parents, bring them to the office." And then she called her secretaries, and I can hear her starting to give directions. So I head out to the car line. Now it's one of those days where both parents are there. Of course they are. And before I can even explain, Eric's dad looks at me and he asks, "Oh, great. Is he in the office again?" Because here's one thing I haven't told you about Eric. Everybody knows Eric. See, Eric is one of those students. Not entirely in a bad way, just in a very memorable way. He's very smart, and he has this wild curly hair. He's got these big blue eyes, and he's doing an amazing job at learning Spanish. But Eric also kind of has this reputation. For example, if you need a lunchtime performance, Eric. If you need someone to do a moonwalk down the hallway while passing out papers, Eric. If you need someone to moo at kids running during PE, Eric. The office knew Eric, the teachers knew Eric, the yard duty knew Eric. So when Dad says, "Is he in the office again?" I almost wish that was the problem because that would be normal. And I sheepishly say no. And I walk them towards the office while explaining everything. Now I can see the secretaries through the little window in the office door, and they're both wide-eyed and braced for impact because Eric's mom is coming in hot and ready. As I'm telling her, her nostrils are flaring, and she's not straight up blaming me, but she's kind of blaming me, and she's just like ready to have someone's head roll for this, which I don't blame her. I'm telling her son is missing right now. But before we can even speak, one of the secretaries raises her hands and says, "Eric's okay. He was hiding on the bus." Silence. Just silence. Because I had spent what felt like an hour mentally preparing for emergency protocols. And Eric had been on the bus the entire time, hiding on purpose. He told his parents that he took a nap and that he fell asleep. But if you're listening to the sound of my voice, yeah. Anyways, the police had already been called, and Eric got a ride back to school in a police car. And apparently he enjoyed it very much, because when he turned that corner to our school, he was grinning like this was just part of the experience. Meanwhile, I'm still processing the phrase, he was hiding on the bus. Not lost, not missing, just Eric. Hiding. When everything was finally resolved, I did what every teacher does after a day like that. I packed up my papers for grading over the weekend. I packed up my 5 bags, and I smiled like a functioning human being until I made it to my car. And then my body caught up with my brain and everything I had been holding on to, and I vomited right there in the parking lot. Then I opened the door, sat in my car, and I fell asleep. Because sometimes teaching isn't about reflection. It's about straight up survival. And sometimes you didn't lose a student. You just forgot to check the bus. Oh my goodness. Lesson learned. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you something. Teachers, parents, anyone who has ever been responsible for small humans in groups. What is your field trip, classroom, or childcare moment that had you fully convinced something had gone terribly wrong, only to find out it was something completely ridiculous? Drop your stories, and I promise to read them. And I also promise they will make me feel slightly better about my own life choices. And if you've enjoyed today's episode of the Veteran Teacher Files, make sure you subscribe, follow, and share the podcast with your favorite teacher, parent, or anyone who thinks managing children is easy. Because we know the truth, it's not. I'm the Dragon Lady, and I'll see you next time.